In the world of trading, everyone talks about strategies, indicators, and risk management. You hear about chart patterns, technical setups, backtesting, and timing entries to perfection. But there's something far more powerful, far more dangerous if left unchecked, that rarely gets the attention it deserves. It's the voice inside your own head, the inner critic, the one that whispers, "You're not good enough." The one that sneers, "You'll never be consistent." The one that haunts you after a loss and mocks you during a win. The one that turns a red trade into a red day, and a red day into a red week. You know the voice I'm talking about. And if you're being honest, that voice has cost you more money, more confidence, and more sleep than any indicator or market event ever has. That voice is not just noise, it's your inner environment. And it shapes everything from how you handle losses, to how you manage risk, to how you show up every single day. Here's the hard truth. You can have the best trading system in the world, but if your mind is filled with doubt, fear, and constant self-criticism, it will sabotage your results every single time. That's why this audiobook isn't about price action. It's not about Fibonacci levels or moving averages. It's about something deeper, something more personal. It's about you. It's about learning how to recognize the toxic patterns in your internal dialogue. It's about understanding where your negative self-talk comes from and why it keeps showing up. It's about rewiring the way you speak to yourself, especially when the pressure is on. Because when you stop being your own worst enemy, you become your most powerful ally. Inside this audiobook, you're going to explore 15 deep, emotionally honest sections, all told from a second-person perspective. This isn't theory, it's lived reality. It's what you feel in the pit of your stomach after a bad day. It's what echoes in your mind after every missed opportunity. And more importantly, it's the path to freedom. You'll learn how to silence the voice of self-doubt, how to break the spiral of guilt and regret, how to replace your inner critic with an inner coach, one that keeps you grounded, focused, and emotionally resilient. This is about creating consistent profits by building a consistent mindset. Because in the end, it's not your strategy that will make or break you. It's your relationship with yourself. So if you're tired of the mental sabotage, if you're ready to take control of your inner world, then this journey is for you. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The Voice That Whispers Doubt. You wake up before the sun. The screens are still dark. The market hasn't opened yet, but your mind is already racing. There's a voice inside, subtle at first, whispering, "You're going to screw it up again today." It's familiar, too familiar. You try to shake it off, make coffee, sit down, review your plan. But that voice, the critic, lurks in every quiet pause, every breath before a trade. It waits in the silence, and when you hesitate, it strikes. You're not good enough. You always lose on trades like this. Don't kid yourself. This isn't for people like you. You've heard it before. Every trader has. But maybe no one talks about it. Not enough, anyway. Because trading isn't just about entries, exits, and risk management. It's about the mental game. And in that game, the inner critic can be the most ruthless opponent you'll ever face. It doesn't care how many books you've read, how many courses you've taken, how many indicators you've tested. When that voice gets loud enough, it drowns out all logic, all discipline, all experience. You hesitate on a setup you've seen 100 times. You skip it. It runs. You feel regret. The voice seizes its chance. See, you always mess it up. You never take the right trades. Later, you force a trade out of guilt, out of revenge. It fails. The critic, now smug, doubles down. Told you, you're not cut out for this. You begin to believe it. Slowly, subconsciously, you accept it as truth. And that, right there, is where your consistency dies. Not in the charts, not in the trade, but in the moment you let that voice define your identity. Here's the truth. That voice is not you. It sounds like you. It uses your vocabulary. It wears your memories like a mask, but it is not your truth. It's a distortion, a defense mechanism, a product of fear, ego, and survival instincts, but not of logic, not of strategy, and definitely not of mastery. The inner critic evolved from something useful. Once upon a time, its job was to protect you, to prevent failure, to avoid pain. But in trading, that protective instinct becomes a saboteur. Because in trading, you have to be willing to lose, to fail forward, to take smart risks, and the critic hates that. It wants safety, comfort, certainty. It thrives on control. And in the chaos of the markets, there is no real control, only process, only probabilities, only plans and execution. So the critic panics. It tells you to skip the trade, exit early, doubt your system, break your rules. You'll look stupid if this doesn't work. Everyone else gets it. Why don't you? You're just pretending to be a trader. But let's break that pattern, right here, right now. You are not a fraud. You are not broken. You are not behind. You are in the process, in the work, on the path. And that voice, it's just noise. So what do you do when the critic speaks? You listen, but not to believe. You listen to understand. You listen to expose its roots. Because the critic gains power in the shadows, but in the light of awareness, it begins to shrink. You start observing it like a scientist. Oh, interesting. It's showing up again before I place a trade. You take a breath. You name it. That's the critic speaking, not me. You ground yourself. You remind yourself of your plan, your system, your process. You don't fight the voice. You don't argue with it. You simply don't give it the wheel. You become the driver again. And over time, something shifts. You start recognizing patterns not just in the markets, but in your mind. You see how self-doubt rises before you size up, how perfectionism shows up after a string of wins, how shame creeps in after a loss, whispering that you're worthless. But you also notice that these patterns are not permanent. They're learned, and what's learned can be unlearned, rewired, rewritten. You begin to replace the critic's voice with your own voice, calm, rational, disciplined. You start saying things like, I followed my plan. That's a win no matter what the outcome. This trade does not define me. Every loss is data. Every win is a reflection of process. And those words begin to form a new narrative, one of resilience, of self-trust, of quiet, unshakable belief. You stop chasing certainty. You start cultivating confidence. You don't eliminate the critic. It may never disappear completely, but you learn to lead despite it, to act with clarity, to trade with integrity, to grow with compassion. That's the work, and it's not always easy, but it's worth it. Because once you break the grip of the inner critic, you unlock something deeper than profits. You unlock your power. And that changes everything. Chapter 2. When Self-Talk Becomes Sabotage. You sit in front of the screen. The candles flicker across your monitor, rising and falling with hypnotic rhythm. But behind the price action, something more subtle is unfolding. Your internal dialogue is beginning to stir. At first, it's just a quiet murmur. This setup looks okay, but what if it fails? You've lost on this pattern before. Maybe wait just a little longer. You start second-guessing. Not because the setup changed, not because your system gave you a signal, but because your self-talk turned against you. It doesn't scream. It doesn't bark commands. No, the inner critic is more clever than that. It disguises itself as caution, as logic, as smart decision-making. But you know the truth. Deep down, this isn't logic, it's fear, dressed up as reason. Because this isn't the first time it's happened. You've seen this movie before. You hesitate, the trade runs without you, and the next time you jump in too early just to compensate. It's a cycle, one born from a war inside your mind. You begin to realize something painful and profound. The problem isn't the market. It's the conversation happening inside your own head. That voice, it's not just random noise. It's been shaped by years of doubt, rejection, perfectionism, childhood experiences, even past traumas. All those moments where you felt not enough, they're archived, stored, replayed. And in trading, they all get triggered. Because the market is the perfect mirror. It reflects back your fears, your ego, your insecurities. Every single flaw in your psychology will eventually show up in your performance. So when that self-talk kicks in, you always blow it. You're too emotional. You'll never be consistent. It's not giving you market analysis. It's delivering an old internal script. And the tragedy is, you often believe it. You don't even question where it came from. You don't ask, whose voice is this really? Is it your voice or someone else's? A parent, a coach, an old boss, a younger version of you that just wanted to be safe. It doesn't matter where it started. What matters now is this: you're allowed to rewrite it. You're allowed to stop treating every thought as truth. Thoughts are just thoughts. They're not facts. They're not destiny. They're mental weather. Some days cloudy, some days clear. And you are the observer. You are the sky behind the clouds. So when the inner critic starts whispering, you pause. You take a breath. You say to yourself, that's just a thought. That's just old programming. That's not the truth of who I am now. And suddenly you create distance. You're no longer fused to the voice. You're watching it, studying it, reclaiming your power from it. This doesn't mean you become arrogant. It doesn't mean you ignore feedback or accountability. It means you stop attacking yourself. Because trading is hard enough without you becoming your own worst enemy. You need clarity, not condemnation. You need structure, not shame. You need a supportive internal coach, not a punishing internal judge. So what does that sound like? Instead of, I always mess this up, you say, I've made mistakes before, but I'm learning. Instead of, I can't trust myself, you say, I'm building trust with each trade I execute with discipline. Instead of, I'm too emotional, you say, I'm learning to feel without reacting. These aren't just affirmations, they're rewirings, replacements, reprogramming. Because your brain doesn't just listen to what you say, it becomes what you repeat. Your self-talk creates your internal environment, and your internal environment determines how you show up in every trade, every decision, every win, every loss. So here's the question you start asking yourself each day. Is the voice in my head helping me or hurting me? If it's helping, listen. If it's hurting, challenge it, reframe it, heal it. And the more you do this, the more space you create. Space between thought and reaction, between fear and decision, between the critic and your true voice. That true voice is quiet but strong, grounded, honest. It doesn't avoid mistakes, but it doesn't weaponize them either. It learns, it adapts, it grows. That voice is your trader's intuition, mature, practiced, emotionally regulated. You're not trying to silence all thoughts. You're learning to curate them, to design an inner world that supports consistency, not sabotages it. Because consistent profits require consistent execution, and consistent execution requires a consistent mindset. One trade at a time, one breath at a time, one internal shift at a time. So the next time you hear that voice say, "You're not good enough," you smile gently. You whisper back, "That's not true anymore." And you place the trade calm, present, intentional. This is the beginning of a new internal dialogue. This is how you begin to trade from your center. Chapter 3: Triggers, Tilt, and the Downward Spiral. It doesn't start with a big loss. It starts with something small. A trade that almost worked. One that should have worked. One where you followed your setup, but the market just didn't cooperate. You take the loss. You breathe. You remind yourself, that was a good loss. Process over outcome. But the critic is watching, quietly, waiting. Then it happens again. Another clean setup. Another stop out. This time, the voice gets louder. "What's wrong with you? Why can't you read this market? You're slipping, again." And before you know it, something clicks inside. A trigger gets pulled. Suddenly, you're not trading anymore, you're reacting. You stop analyzing clearly. You ignore your rules. You double your position. You chase the next setup like you're trying to prove something to the market, or worse, to yourself. And just like that, you're in tilt. You've been here before. Everyone gets here eventually. Tilt isn't just emotional, it's neurological. It's your fight or flight system hijacking your decision-making. It's cortisol flooding your brain. It's your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for logic, discipline, executive function, shutting down under pressure. And the critic? It loves tilt, because tilt confirms every dark thing it believes about you. You're impulsive. You always lose control. You're a failure pretending to be a trader. And as the losses mount, you spiral, not just financially, but emotionally. The account goes red and your confidence bleeds out with every candle that moves against you. But here's what no one tells you. Tilt doesn't start with a chart. It starts with a thought. It starts with one sentence you believe too quickly. One insult from your critic that you didn't question. One moment of identification when you forgot that the voice in your head is just that, a voice, not a verdict, not a prophecy, not the truth, just a voice. And so the real work begins not after the trade, but before, in the space between stimulus and response, in the breath before action, in the second you notice the urge to get it all back and instead choose to pause. Because in that pause, everything can change. You can recognize the trigger. You can name the emotion. You can ground yourself. You can step out of the spiral before it pulls you under. It might feel like a small victory, a pause, a canceled order, a walk around the block, a journal entry instead of a revenge trade. But that tiny shift, that's you reclaiming control from the critic. You're proving, through action, that you are not your emotions, you're not your losses, you're not your urges. You are the one witnessing all of that. And that makes you powerful. This is what real trading mastery looks like. Not some perfectly clean equity curve, but the ability to sit in discomfort and not self-destruct. The ability to feel fear and still follow your rules. The ability to hear the critic and not let it steer. You start creating new protocols. You begin to recognize your early warning signs. You get honest with yourself. When I check my P&L 10 times an hour, I know I'm on edge. When I start ignoring my stop loss, it's not strategy, it's emotion. When I feel the urge to make it all back, that's my trigger to walk away. And you do. You close the charts, you reset, you breathe, not because you're weak, but because you're wise. You're beginning to trade like a professional, not just in your system, but in your mindset. Not just in how you manage risk, but in how you manage yourself. That's the edge that matters most, because the biggest losses you've ever taken, they weren't technical. They were psychological, emotional, ego-driven, shame-fueled. And the recovery didn't begin with a winning trade. It began with a change in how you respond to your own mind. The critic still shows up. It always will. But now you have a plan for that too. Now, when the spiral starts, you catch it sooner. You catch it when it's a whisper, not a scream. You interrupt it with a breath, a mantra, a pause. You protect your equity by protecting your energy. You protect your process by protecting your peace. You no longer need to win every trade. You only need to win the battle within, the one between your fear and your focus, your critic and your clarity. And each time you choose clarity, you're training a new response. You're reconditioning your nervous system. You're turning emotional chaos into calm execution. This is how you build consistency. This is how you create longevity. This is how you begin to silence the spiral before it ever starts. Chapter 4. Rewriting the Narrative, From Critic to Coach. You stare at the screen, not to find a trade, but to find yourself. Because lately, the market hasn't been your biggest challenge. It's been the voice inside, the one that judges, questions, and constantly reminds you of everything that's gone wrong. It narrates your every move, and it's rarely kind. You miss an entry? You're lazy. You always hesitate. You cut a winner too early? You're weak. You never hold long enough. You follow your plan and still take a loss? You're fooling yourself. You'll never make it. That voice doesn't guide you. It doesn't teach you. It condemns you. And yet, you've listened for so long that you've begun to believe it's the truth, that this is how you motivate yourself, through guilt, shame, pressure, and punishment. But here's the secret no one taught you. Self-attack is not self-discipline. Let that sink in. You don't become more consistent by berating yourself. You don't become more focused by shaming your mistakes. You don't build trust in yourself by tearing yourself down every time things don't go your way. You've tried that. It doesn't work, and it's exhausting. So today, you try something radical. You flip the script. You decide to stop being your critic and start being your coach. What would a great coach say in this moment? After a loss, after a mistake, after an emotional impulse? They wouldn't humiliate you. They wouldn't echo your worst fears. They wouldn't say, "You'll never get this right." They would pause. They would ask questions. They would guide you back to the plan. They would say, "Okay, let's review what happened. No judgment, just data. You slipped here. That's okay. Now let's talk about why. You're learning. This is part of the process. Let's make a small adjustment." They wouldn't expect perfection. They'd expect progress. And that's what you begin to give yourself. Progress over perfection. You start to journal differently. Not just tracking trades, but tracking thoughts. Not just logging entries, but logging emotions. You write, "Felt anxious before entering, paused and took a breath. Still followed plan." You write, "Took a loss, but noticed the critic coming in hot. Chose not to believe it." These are small wins, invisible victories, moments no one else sees, but they matter because they're the foundation of self-trust. And self-trust, that's the most underrated edge in trading. Because when you trust yourself, you don't panic in uncertainty. You don't abandon your system mid-trade. You don't need every outcome to be a win. You know you'll show up, no matter what. That kind of confidence doesn't come from winning streaks. It comes from inner alignment, from treating yourself with the same patience and respect you'd offer a teammate or a student or a friend. Yes, you're still accountable. Yes, you're still disciplined. But now you're driven by clarity, not criticism. You're becoming the voice you always needed. Firm, but fair. Direct, but kind. Honest, but encouraging. You say things like, I made a mistake, but I learned something valuable. I didn't follow the rule, but I know why, and I'll fix it. Today didn't go well, but I'm not going to quit on myself. And slowly, the critic begins to fade, not because you silenced it, but because you replaced it. You filled your mental space with a new narrative, a story where you are capable, where you are improving, where you are enough. Even on the red days, especially on the red days, because that's when it counts the most. You stop defining yourself by one trade, or one day, or even 1 month. You zoom out. You start seeing the big picture, not just of your account curve, but of your personal evolution. You're not just learning how to trade, you're learning how to treat yourself with respect in the face of uncertainty. That's a superpower, and it shows up in how you sit, how you breathe, how you respond to a losing streak, how you hold yourself in the fire without breaking. This is what separates amateurs from professionals, not strategy, but self-concept. Professionals don't avoid mistakes, they recover faster. They don't listen to the critic, they listen to the coach. They keep showing up day after day, not because they're fearless, but because they've built the resilience to face the fear without collapsing into it. That's the path you're on now. A new way of trading, a new way of thinking, a new way of being with yourself. Calm, honest, focused. Not because the critic is gone, but because the coach is louder. Chapter 5. The Cost of Self-Betrayal. You sit in front of the chart, your finger hovering over the mouse. You know what you're supposed to do. The plan is clear, the rules are written, the setup is right in front of you. But something pulls you away, a little voice that whispers, just this once. It's okay to break the rule, you'll fix it later. You deserve a win. And in that instant, you betray yourself. You ignore your system. You override your better judgment. You take a trade based on emotion, not execution, on impulse, not insight. And the worst part? You know it. You know even before the outcome that you've stepped out of alignment, that you violated something deeper than a strategy. You betrayed your own trust. And that hurts more than the loss itself. Because the loss is temporary, but the guilt, the self-disappointment, that lingers. You tell yourself it's not a big deal, that everyone does it, that trading is chaotic and sometimes you just need to go with your gut. But deep down, you feel the fracture. You feel the critic start to stir again. See, you can't even follow your own rules. You're hopeless. Why do you even try? And suddenly, the cycle begins again. Self-betrayal followed by self-attack. Guilt, then shame. A burst of regret, followed by an avalanche of internal judgment. It doesn't matter if the trade wins or loses. What matters is that you abandoned yourself. That's what stings. But what if instead of spiraling, you pause? What if you meet that moment, not with punishment, but with presence? You ask yourself, why did I break my rule? What emotion was I trying to avoid? What was I chasing? Because it's never just about the trade. Sometimes you break rules because you're anxious, and you think one quick win will calm you down. Sometimes it's because you're bored, and the silence feels unbearable. Sometimes it's because you're frustrated, and you need to prove something to the market, to someone else, or to yourself. But none of that creates consistency. None of that leads to mastery. So instead of more shame, you offer yourself radical honesty. You say, yes, I slipped, but I'm going to understand why so I don't keep repeating it. You start journaling not just the setup, but the state you were in. Not just the result, but the reason behind the impulse. You track your internal data as closely as your technical data. And over time, a pattern emerges. You begin to see that your biggest trading mistakes didn't happen randomly. They happened when your inner state was off, when you were tired, distracted, insecure, when you were trying to fix an emotional wound with a market outcome. And when you realize that, everything shifts. You stop focusing only on how to win. You start focusing on how to stay aligned with yourself. You learn that discipline isn't about forcing yourself. It's about trusting yourself. And trust is built in the small moments. The moment you want to break your rule and don't. The moment you feel the urge to overtrade and step away instead. The moment you take a loss and stay grounded instead of chasing. Every time you act with integrity, you build inner capital. And that capital compounds. It turns into self-respect. It turns into confidence. It turns into consistency, not just in trading, but in who you are becoming. Because you begin to see that trading isn't just about money, it's about identity. Are you someone who honors your process? Are you someone who stays calm under pressure? Are you someone who learns instead of blames? Are you someone who leads themselves? Every decision, every moment, every tiny choice is an answer to those questions. And when you start making choices that align with your highest standard, not your fear, not your ego, not your critic, you start to feel something deeper than pride. You feel peace. You may not win every trade, but you win the day, because you didn't abandon yourself, because you showed up with courage, because you traded from integrity, not impulse. And that is the edge most traders never find. Chapter 6: The Hidden Power of Emotional Awareness. You glance at your screen, eyes flickering between charts, indicators, and the clock. Something feels off, not in the market, but in you. Your breathing is shallow, your hands are tense, you can't focus. The setup is there, but your mind isn't. And if you're honest, it hasn't been for a while. That's when you realize it. Your emotions are running in the background, like hidden programs on an overloaded computer. You're trying to trade through frustration, through fear, through fatigue, and it's costing you. Not because emotions are bad, but because unacknowledged emotions are dangerous. They influence your decisions without your permission. They shape your trades without your awareness. They guide your hand without your consent. Because emotion, especially the kind you ignore, always finds a way to act. It leaks into your timing. It clouds your judgment. It disguises itself as logic, but it's not. You've lived this before. You overtrade after a loss, not because the setup was good, but because you couldn't sit with disappointment. You cut a winner short, not because your plan said so, but because fear whispered, "Don't let this slip away." You skip a valid trade, not because it was flawed, but because your inner critic shouted, "You'll mess it up!" This is the silent sabotage of suppressed emotion. And the solution isn't suppression, it's awareness. You pause. You feel into your body. Where is the tension? What emotion is alive in you right now? Is it anger, fear, guilt, shame? You name it. Because naming an emotion takes it from the shadows and brings it into the light. You say, I'm feeling anxious. I'm scared of losing again. I'm ashamed of how I traded yesterday. And just like that, the emotion loses its grip. Not because it disappears, but because now you're in relationship with it. You're not avoiding it. You're witnessing it. And that makes all the difference. You learn that emotions are messengers, not enemies. Fear isn't the problem. It's your signal that risk feels real today, that you need to double-check your plan or maybe size down. Anger isn't the enemy. It's showing you where you feel violated, by the market, by your own actions, or by unmet expectations. Even shame, as painful as it is, reveals where you've disconnected from your values. So instead of fighting these emotions, you listen. You say, "Thank you for showing up. Now let's work together." You begin building emotional hygiene into your trading routine. Not just chart prep, but mind prep. Before the session, you check in. How am I feeling? What needs attention? Where am I vulnerable today? You journal it. You breathe through it. You reset. This doesn't make you weak. It makes you aware. It makes you agile. It makes you dangerous in the best possible way because now you're not being blindsided by unconscious impulses. You're present. You're centered. You're trading from clarity. This is the edge no one talks about. The emotional edge. The one that separates the trader who blows up in silence from the trader who recalibrates with grace. Because emotions don't ruin trades. Unacknowledged emotions do. When you feel them fully, without judgment, without resistance, they begin to move, to release, to settle, and you return to the screen, clear, ready, still human, still emotional, but not reactive. You execute the trade. Win or lose, you stay calm. Not because you're numb, but because you're regulated. Not because you've mastered the market, but because you've started mastering yourself. This is the practice. This is the path. Not perfect execution, but present awareness. Not emotional suppression, but emotional intelligence. You start seeing the market differently, not as a place to prove something or earn your worth or fix your wounds, but as a mirror, a teacher, a stage on which your inner world gets reflected, one candlestick at a time. So now when the emotions rise, you don't panic. You smile. You say, I see you. And you trade not from fear, but from full awareness. Conclusion. You've made it to the end of this journey. And what a journey it's been. Not through charts, not through candlesticks or setups, but through the terrain of your own mind. You've faced the voice that tells you you're not good enough. You've listened to the inner narrative that tries to sabotage your growth. And maybe, for the first time, you've looked at it directly and said, you don't get to control me anymore. Because now you understand. The true battle in trading isn't on the screen. It's not the volatility. It's not the algorithm. It's not the market makers. It's you. It's the quiet voice inside that either builds you up or breaks you down. And the good news? You are not stuck with that voice. You can retrain it. You can reframe it. You can rebuild it from the ground up. You've learned that emotional awareness is power. That every thought is not a command, that self-compassion is not weakness, it's the very foundation of long-term consistency. Because the trader who speaks to themselves with clarity, confidence, and honesty is the trader who endures. And this is where consistency begins, not with perfect entries, but with a healthy internal dialogue. Let this be your new edge. Not more information, not more indicators, but more intention, more self-leadership, more calm beneath the chaos. If this video spoke to you, if you recognized pieces of your own journey in these words, then let's keep growing together. Drop a comment below and let me know, what part of this resonated the most for you? What's one thing you're committed to changing in your self-talk starting today? Your experience could be the insight someone else needs to hear. And if you want more content like this, real, emotionally honest trading psychology that actually speaks to the heart of the trader's experience, then go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Because every week we dive deep into the mindset of trading, without the hype, without the noise, and without pretending it's easy. And don't forget to hit the like button if this video helped you. It tells the algorithm that this message matters and helps us reach more traders who need it. You're not alone on this journey. Thousands of traders around the world are waking up to this truth. Success doesn't start with the strategy. It starts with the self. And from this moment on, you get to decide. Will you trade from fear or from focus? From criticism or from compassion? From reaction or from resilience? The voice inside you can be your greatest liability or your greatest asset. The choice is yours now. So keep showing up, keep doing the inner work, and always remember, your self-talk shapes your success. Until next time, stay calm, stay focused, and trade with integrity.